I believe Dennis has already done roll call, so do we need to do it verbally or can we just have it?
I could call it neighborhoods.
That's fine.
Okay,
Okay,
just the ones that are
Kanema,
here, how about?
Kanema,
Here.
That would be Linda.
that would be Linda. Two Rivers, absent. Gaffney Lane,
Amy?
Amy. Park Place,
Steve?
Tower Vista,
Yep.
Vern, and Janice Morris. Oh, Barkley Hills?
Yep, Janice.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
That's
And
our
we
group.
welcome Laura. Christina is out on vacation right now. And so first up is Laura Turway.
Thank you very much. Laura Turway, Community Development Director for the city. It's good to be back at CIC. I used to be Christina for some time. All right, so I'm here to talk to you guys about a package of code amendments that is going to go before the Planning Commission and the City Commission. I will try and keep it to 30 minutes, but talking about code amendments is just so exciting. So tell me to speed along if I need to. All right, so the purpose of this meeting is to inform you that code amendments are happening and to inform you of some high-level changes. I'm not going into the detail of what the code amendments are, nor did I provide a redlined version. I'll show you on the website where to get it, and I'll send you an email afterwards with a link to all the codes. We have a draft code now, and we anticipate it changing as it goes through the review process. And we'll be at a couple of work sessions in Planning Commission this next month, the month of July, and then we'll go into hearings mid-August, and we hope to be through the City Commission before November. All right, so this code amendment includes two things. We are proposing code amendments because originally the City Commission had heard concerns from citizens of our city that they couldn't find a place to live. It's hard to sell your house. Where are you going to buy a house? You can't afford to buy a house. That it's very difficult to find housing. And so from that, we have a couple of City Commission goals that look at equitable housing. I'll talk more about what equitable housing means, but we also have in this package other code changes that didn't go through our equitable housing committee. So I'll talk about both of those. Equitable housing is not just low-income housing. It is diverse, quality, and physically accessible, affordable housing choices with access to opportunities and services. So it's housing for all in a place that makes sense for all ages and abilities and income. It's, can you find a house that suits your needs to anybody? So we're talking about this full spectrum. Right now in Oregon City, we have a lot of single-family homes, 71% to be precise. And at the same time, we have a lot of 1- and 2-person households within these single-family homes. And we've seen our numbers growing and growing through the statistics for single and 2-family households. And sometimes we've heard feedback that it's harder to find households, say, if you don't want a big old house anymore. All right. Also, housing is becoming out of reach for some people. The percentage of income that you spend on housing, by housing we mean housing plus electricity and everything that goes with housing too, is getting pretty high. So on the screen you can see a measurement of who spends more than 35% of their income on housing. You could tell in the renters it's more than 40%, which is quite high. So we feel that there may be a mismatch for housing, for what housing options people want and what is available. So we met with a lot of people and we had a lot of meetings. And I don't expect you to read all of those, but each line on the screen represents at least one meeting. The stakeholder interviews at the top, there was lots of them. But we went to the community to talk about housing. And we put together a technical advisory team and a project advisory team, so a citizen advisory team. I couldn't be happier with the citizen advisory team or the technical one either, but the citizen advisory team had so many new faces that we hadn't seen before, so many different perspectives represented on the team. And both of those met 5 times. We had a couple of online surveys. We had an open house. We did all sorts of stuff to get to where we're at today. And where we're at today is a place where we have draft code amendments that I want to share with you. A lot of the draft code amendments deal with the missing middle, which is a term that talks about the space between a traditional single-family home and a traditional apartment complex, like a mid-rise apartment complex. There's a range of other options within that spectrum, and not all of them are available here. Some of them are, but not all of them are. So I'm going to go through each of them. We're starting with single family. And at the bottom of the screen, you can see this color chart. And the green will tell you that that type of housing is allowed within that zoning designation. As you recall, we have a comprehensive plan, which is our basic guidelines to the city, and it splits our residential zoning designations into 3 categories: low density, medium density, and high density. And so you'll notice some of these options go together with all the low density or all the medium density or so forth. So they're listed on the screen. So single family homes, you can't do them in R2, which is a 2,000 square foot lot. It's our traditional multifamily zoning designation, but you can have them everywhere else. Accessory dwelling units, we allow them now. We've allowed them since 2004. We have a couple of special developments that did them, but really outside of those special developments, we maybe have a handful in the city since we allowed them in 2004. Right now, we allow 1 accessory dwelling unit. In the proposed code amendments, we will still allow 1 accessory dwelling unit in all the residential zoning designations. Except for in R2, it's a bonus to an existing single family home, just like they're allowed right now. We did make some changes to the ADU code, though. Some of the changes include rolling back the requirement that one be owner occupied and rolling back a parking requirement, because we don't even have parking requirements for the home itself, but we did for the ADU or for duplexes or anything like that. So we went through some of those standards and took a look at what makes sense for Oregon City and where the barriers to housing are. I would have to say we do have an internal consultant team that we utilized, and that included a group of economists and other experts in the field. And in particular for ADUs, we had a consultant, Eli Speck, for Orange Splat, and they write the code on ADUs, so it's very helpful. Okay, the next housing choice is our townhouses. So this is similar to how our zoning is now. So now they're not allowed in the low density residential single family zones. They're still not. But in the future, they would be allowed in R5. They are allowed in R3.5, and they are not allowed in R2. So when you think of a townhouse in this context, we're thinking of like a San Francisco shared wall, but you own your own lot. So you own the ground that your house sits on, your house just shares a wall with your neighbors. And so the proposed code amendments really opens up some of those housing options in our multifamily zoning designation by allowing people to not just do the traditional multifamily, to do things like townhouses, and that could provide different housing opportunities or price points for the public as well. Next is manufactured homes. Our code is pretty silent on manufactured homes. However, we do have about 400 manufactured homes in the city. And we also have a park outside the city limits, but inside our urban growth boundary. And so one thing that we wanted to do was provide protection for these manufactured home parks if they wanted to expand or change over time. We recently had one that just wanted to add 1 more unit, and even I will admit it was just very process heavy and difficult and very cumbersome to do so. So we wanted to provide protections for them. Sorry, I was sick this weekend. They're all within the R3.5 zoning designation, so that's where all the protections are. Feel free to comment when I'm talking to keep things going if you want. So the next option is a corner duplex. This is a new option for the city. A corner duplex would be allowed in all low-density residential neighborhoods. So all single-family neighborhoods they're no longer single-family neighborhoods. They include a variety of housing choices. And this would allow duplexes on corner lots only, not mid-block, but just corners. At least one of them would face the street. Sometimes they would face each side of the street. And the density associated with that is the same as a single-family home. So you are seeing a little bit of a density bump right there. The next is duplexes. So this is 2 units on 1 lot. Looks similar to the townhouse thing we were talking about, but this case, they share the same property. Duplexes are now allowed in R 3.5, and so we expanded that to provide additional housing options in R5 because it is medium density residential. So they could be mid-block duplexes as opposed to the corner duplexes we were talking about, and also on the corner, and then also in the R2 zoning designation as well.
Laura, how's all like R5 better now?
So R5 is a good question. R5 is on a map, but it doesn't exist in reality yet. So it's mainly in our concept plan areas. You'll see a lot of R5. R5 makes me think of a lot on 5,000 square feet. And we actually have a lot of the city that meets that. Think of McLaughlin, Kenema. That is a 5,000 square foot lot. It's just zoned R6. But the actual R5 zone is in concept plan areas now, so it's not applied. It's not applied to the city yet. The next is internal conversions. So here we're talking about homes that are at least 20 years old, and rather than scraping the home off and building or subdividing, we're trying to retain our existing neighborhood character by allowing people to invest in the homes that they have. And so there's limitations on how much you can do expansions, but you could take a home and you could have up to 4 dwelling units inside that shell. Now, commercial building code kicks in after 2, so we believe that it's probably very, very unlikely that you'll see more than 2. So from 2, you could think of either similar to a house and an ADU or a duplex. But that is an option that would be allowed in most of the zoning designations. And again, that supports the retention of our existing neighborhood character, but yet still provides another opportunity, hopefully at different price points for people to find a place to live. The next option, and we're nearing towards the end of all the options, is a 3 to 4plex. You may have heard them referred to as multiplexes before 2 weeks ago when you've gone through our process. But the 3 to 4plex is exactly what it sounds, 3 or 4 units, and it can be in any configuration. And in this scenario, we're proposing that they can occur within our medium density residential zones as well as our high density zone. The density is still the same in the high density zone, but there's a little bit of a density bonus in the R5 and R35. Also, one more thing that's important to note about 3 or 4plexes is that we're proposing to process them over the counter without a public review. We have clear and objective standards for what they need to look like, the minimum lot size, and so there is no public review process associated with that. And that's why we have public review processes, is when there's discretion in decision making. If there's a criteria where you get 10 people and some could say one answer and some could say another, that's what public review process is for. That's why this is pure, clear and objective. Do you meet the minimum lot size? Yes, no. Do you meet these design standards? Yes, no. Then we have cluster housing. You may be familiar because we've had cottage housing since 2004. We've only had 1 application for development though, and we tweaked it a bit. We called it cluster instead of cottage, but really it means the same thing, dwelling units around a central courtyard. And we went through those standards and make sure that they made sense. Again, was there any barrier that was an issue? So there are some design standards that we have associated with cottage housing in our existing code now, and we expanded it to allow different designs in cluster housing.
Laura, how does that maintain in the low density? If someone takes two houses down and puts in a big cluster, that completely changes the look. So what's the thought process there?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it is allowed now, so we're proposing to retain it. We're just calling it something else. You can do that, but, sorry. Thank you for your patience. Okay, there is, yes. So now, if you have at least a 10,000 square foot lot, and these standards get retained, if you have a 10,000 square foot lot, you can build multiple cottages. The cottages there's a density associated with each of the zoning designations. So it's a 2-to-1 in the low density and a 1 to 1.5 in the medium density residential. That we're not proposing to change, but to retain. But there's a trade-off for that. There's size limitations on the home. There's design standards on the home. There's open space standards on the home. There are a suite of requirements that go with allowing cottages. So your question was about, is it change the character? I mean, it's a different development than what's there. In some neighborhoods, the cottages are going to be a lot smaller than the houses around them. And others, they might be similar to. But it is something that we have in our code now, and it's something we're proposing to retain because it provides a housing opportunity for people. One thing that's important in the cluster housing, we're proposing that each of the units could be on their own lot. That is different than cottage housing. So I could think of an employee that used to work at the city and she just wanted her own little cottage, and she wanted to own her own land and not be in, an HOA for her own land. She wanted a garden house, she wants a garden. And this would have provided an opportunity for her to do so. So again, we're thinking about the residents that we have when we have so many single and two family residents, and then our supply that we have is really just larger houses.
So how would that owning your own land work in an R10? I mean, if you had an R10 and you put in 4 houses or however it would work for the density, but each house owned its own, you've just taken away that each lot is 10,000 square feet.
Yeah, you would get a smaller lot. So this would ideally be more affordable.
But then that changes it from an R10 designation. So
It's
how does that
not,
work?
it's a low density residential designation. And I think the crux of a lot of this is that it's not R10 single family houses anymore. It's a range of housing opportunities within that general density. Mainly it's that density, but there are things that you could do to have smaller homes at a slightly higher density like cottage housing. So we're no longer referring to them as 10,000 square foot lots.
So you're saying that it would be 2-to-1 like a duplex. You could never have more than 2 on the 10,000. Is that right?
You're on corner duplexes is what you're talking about. You can have mid-block duplexes in R10, but yes, that is the maximum density you could have in a cottage, in a cluster housing.
You could have 2 per 10,000 lot.
Yes, you get a 2-to-1 ratio in R10.
And that is taking an existing house on a 10,000 square foot lot, and you could break that up a little bit with a cluster house on that?
You
That would
could
be
do a couple
demolished.
things. So if you had an existing, you would have to have a vacant lot to do the cluster on a 10,000. You couldn't also have your house.
You have to start with a vacant? Okay, all right.
Because there's size requirements on the clusters, and the house would probably be too big. Unless
You
it
had
was
somehow you
small.
had a teeny house. Well, some of the old houses, maybe there's some somewhere.
Yeah,
Could you take down an existing house and make a clusters if there was like, you've got one house and 3 or 4 lots all together, there's one ownership, and there's one house, it's not particularly architecturally wonderful, it's just, a little Oregon City Cottage that we've had for a long time, can that be removed and all of them put in then? Can you
Yeah,
do something like that?
it can. And everything we're talking about is the same that you can do today and that you could have done since 2004. We just haven't had a lot of them.
So that tweaks my interest on cluster housing. Could that be combined with a new subdivision development that has an existing house that's, could be kept, could not, this question is there as to whether you want to do that. Could you put in a new subdivision that's basically, let's say R10? You could put some clusters into one of those R10 lots.
Yeah.
And that is,
You'd have to go into two lots because it's a 2-to-1 density. So if you had a 20,000 square foot lot within a subdivision, you could do 4 clusters.
okay,
Yes, exactly. And you can do that today too. I'll talk about it in a second, but we have some proposed modifications to our master plan code to help support residential master plans, which could be referred to as PUDs as well.
Like the 3 and 4 plexes, is cluster housing over the counter, or is that?
No, it's not. There's a full study. The only thing, if it's over the counter, I'll tell you, but it's really the single family homes and the 3 to 4 plex. Because now, if you're more than a duplex, it's not over the counter. So we would be pulling the 3 to 4 plex, which is more than 2, back to over the counter because, again, of the clear and objective standards. The next is a topic that came up. We had a public meeting when we did this. We had a charrette of sorts with our advisory teams. And the number one issue people wanted to talk about was shelters. And so you'll see in the documents that we'll send you, but most everything I just told you about was supported by a recommendation of our public advisory team. This one, there was no conclusion reached on this, but our proposed code would be to allow conditional uses in residential zones for up to 10 beds. So in that context, you can think of churches that want to have shelters. Churches are conditional use in residential zones, so they could expand their conditional use for transitional shelters for up to 10 beds. And then also we're proposing a permitted use in MUC1, MUC2, and MUD. Now we have a couple shelters now, and the city has passed emergency ordinances to waive planning requirements, basically. And those shelters, they're in a variety of zoning designations. There's MUC1, there was one in MUD, and then there was a couple in R3. But we didn't do, this is just proposing to make them permitted in MUC1 and MUC and MUD. And a thing that we could compare it to is like a hotel is allowed in MUD, which is like a nightly shelter as well. Next, we get a lot of questions about Airbnb or whatever the versions of Airbnb there are out there. I think there's a lot these days. There are conditional uses in all residential zones if you rent for less than 30 days. They've always been that way. We're not proposing to change it. All right, and now we're gearing towards the end of the presentation, but there's still more slides left, so don't worry. Multifamily design standards is something that we had have some proposed changes to. So as a part of the advisory team, they made some recommendations to reduce parking for multifamily. Right now, it's based on the number of bedrooms. So there's a minimum and a maximum. We're not changing the maximum, but the minimum was all over the board based on if you have 3 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 1 bedroom, or studio. And so we just cleared that up to say the minimum is just 1 space per apartment, which is very close to where the lowest minimum was before. Because in no other application do we have parking standards like that. So for like single family homes, we don't have any parking standards. People just normally have a garage or a driveway, but we don't have that requirement. And same for duplexes. And so it was oddly specific that we were having parking requirements based on the number of bedrooms. The next is some of the design standards were lightened a little bit. We had some requirements for articulation modulation, so how bumpy the building is, and we rewrote them in a cleaner and easier way. Also, we had a requirement that windows be recessed or project 2 inches. We frequently run into problems with that because in a lot of the windows that are installed, if you have to fuss with it, which breaks the warranty, or there's problems associated with recessing. You get true wood windows that do that, but those are a lot different on the cost level than other windows. So the requirement was to just retain trim around windows rather than recess windows. And then also roofing standards, we have a standard that a roof has to be broken up quite frequently, so it's not a long mass. And so the standard just has that application on the street-facing facade, not on the facades that are not facing the street. There's a few other multifamily design standards that we have proposed to adjust, but I won't go into them as well. Those are the biggies. The last thing is an affordable housing density bonus in R2. So that's the multifamily zoning designation. This picture just generally shows the difference between the density bonus means that you could build up to 20% more units in R2. That picture's not really of R2. That looks more downtowny, but the general idea is that you could build up to 20% more. And that is if you have one unit that is affordable housing, then you can have up to 2 more non-affordable housing units. So there's a ratio, which is how you figure out what the density bonus is. Also, if you're in that, it has to be 100% affordable building. So I would presume that we'll never see that unless it's a big housing authority project or something like that. If it's a developer with 1 affordable unit, they don't get this. The group did talk about subdivision lot averaging and decided not to change the standards. The standards were recently changed by the City Commission, which exempted the area under power line easement from the calculation for lot averaging. Master plan, Vern, this is what you were asking about. We went in to strengthen our master plan requirements. It was for both residential and commercial, but it's really written only for commercial. And so we wanted to strengthen those residential standards so you could get things that have housing opportunity, that have a variety of housing types in there, with a trade-off for amenities like parks and open space. The next is site plan design review. We have removed requirements that seem to be difficult to enforce or a little bit arbitrary. So for one is we have a requirement that it's a complementary design to the surrounding area. We want to be very clear with our standards so that staff knows how to implement them, the public knows what they are, and the applicant knows what they are. And so we want to be as clear and objective as possible. Next is that there was a density requirement in site plan design review, and we pulled that out and just put it in the zoning designation. We're also amending our landscaping standards and our lighting standards. Both are cumbersome. The more we looked at other jurisdictions, the more we realized we were sort of on the very cumbersome part of that spectrum. We will still have them and they will still be safe for the public, but they're a little more in tune with other jurisdictions. All right, this is the last of the changey slides. And I'm not gonna read all of these, but I wanna read a couple of big ones that affect you. The first is I'm proposing a change that we post notice of hearings on the city's website and not in a paper. It is very expensive to post things in a paper, and in 15 years, I have yet to meet a single person that said, I read about your project in the public hearings notice part of the paper. So we are proposing to change that.
Is that, I always thought that was a technicality of legal notice to everyone in a normal, no?
It's not an ORS requirement, we impose it on ourselves. But now we post notices on the website, on the emails. We have this cool mappy thing that you guys all know about. We have the signs posted on the site. If you want to know about projects. You will know that there's projects by going into the legal description part of the paper. We haven't seen that. Do you guys have any feedback on that one? That one's a bit of a biggie.
As long as it's not required, I don't see any
Yeah.
Okay.
have it.
And then the other thing is when developers want to have a development, in most cases, they have to have neighborhood association meetings. And this change would allow them to just email. They have to give notice to the chair of the CIC and the neighborhood that they're contacting. But there's requirements that it has to be happen by certified mail unless they give them approval to do otherwise. I mean, the point is, we want people to know what's happening and put them on notice of development. Doing the certified mail seems like an unnecessary step.
I agree with that as long as there's a way to know that it actually went. So personally, I don't like getting certified mail, but at least you get the card back and so you know I got it. But if they just send me an email and it goes to my spam, or they put in an E in my last name where there isn't one, type of, those kinds of things, it can happen, it's a typo. So if there was a way to just say, please reply that you got this or something, I think that would be a necessary. I
Okay.
think that was the whole reason for certified mails, to make sure it really got there, right?
We can do confirmation
I mean, that's my
that
opinion.
as an application requirement that they send back the email where you say, gotcha. Like I acknowledge the email.
You control that during the application process. You tell them, contact the neighborhood association. Now you have two ways, and you're trying to get to one way, one method.
Yes.
Well, legally, it said certified mail in all of the languages. And so we're trying to change that since that's
I'm
kind of
not
going
trying to say
away.
it's a big household or anything, but certified mail may get into a different bucket that coming through my mailbox than what comes over my email.
Yeah,
I see it as a nuisance to the developer or the applicant, really.
Yeah.
not everybody wants their address given out.
Yeah.
Right now you just have your email.
Nothing
true.
is simple, or, we got to make it so we can understand it and get through it, but.
Yeah, it doesn't matter to me.
Okay, I'm going to read maybe the top 4 off the rest
Yeah,
of
because
this
we've got
list.
about 5 minutes.
Okay, good, I can do that. We have to change the height requirement to measure it at the floodplain. Speaking of heights, we have, right now we have a reduction of heights in mixed-use downtown, which is like the downtown area, if they're within 100 feet of a house that exists, or if they're between Main, McLaughlin, 11th, 16th, that block right there, then they can't be 75 feet, they can only be 45 feet, and I don't know why that's there. And so I'm proposing to remove that. We're also allowing mobile food carts. That's a new one. And we are looking at requirements for small cells in the right of way, which is, think of it as an amplifier for a cell tower, for a signal. And it's a box that's like normally 6 cubic feet-ish that's up on a utility pole. So it would go under 1780 communication facilities. All right, there's other stuff. You can read it. We could talk about it. That is the big stuff.
Can you go back real quick?
Yeah,
What is remove the 1-year waiting period for similar applications?
we have a requirement that says if you get denied or if you get denied, you have to wait a year before you reapply again.
Oh.
I really don't. I'm sure it was put there for a good reason, like all of our code. But now if we really can't defend it, I gotta figure out, we gotta get rid of it.
Thank you.
And then we also changed the organization of our codes. We talked about getting rid of our 10, 8, and 6, and now we have one chapter that is low-density residential. We have chapters for single-family design standards, townhouse design standards, multifamily design standards. So it's basically your one-stop shop for design standards for development of that type. Land divisions, we used to have a minor partition and a subdivision, very confusing because the same thing twice. We just have one land division chapter now. And then we separated out, we have a streets chapter and it includes things that like, don't leave a pile of dirt in the street, but then it also includes, so you want to build a street, here are the standards. So we separated out street maintenance requirements from development requirements there too. You will see a mail notice in your postcard. I think it's like lime yellow, electric yellow, or some fun color. But this is it. It was dropped off at the post office at the airport today. And this is your heads up that we're doing something and to come talk to us. We tried to reword it as much as possible, as legally possible, to say what we mean. We are not proposing to do a zone change on anyone's property. We are also not proposing development on anybody's property. It's just these code amendments. We have a work session that's scheduled soon. It looks like you're reading that, Amy. Can I change it?
Yeah, good.
Okay. We have a work session scheduled in July, all July at Planning Commission. We're going to Natural Resources next week, Planning Commission. So you know that slide where there was like, we had a ton of meetings. We still have a ton more meetings to go. We're looking for input. We're going to have an open house here from 4 to 6 p.m. on July 23rd. And we hope to start actual hearings at Planning Commission mid-August and be done by the end of October. That's it.
Whoops. Where's the Planning Commission in September, right?
Yeah, so we're hoping for 3 hearings because we're doing 2 work sessions in front of it. So 5 times for the Planning Commission. And that's excluding the times that we've already been there.
Yep.
Yeah. That's it. If you have any comments, so I'm going to send you a link to all the requirements as well as this general presentation so you get overviews. We'll put that on the website too. Let me know if you have any requirements. This was created from the community for the community. And so it does include things for equitable housing, but it includes other stuff too. We want to make sure that we get it right. Ideally, you would give us comments and we would incorporate those changes as they come, but you can always come directly speak to any of the commission as well. But please, if you can, call us, chat with us. If there's something we missed or we're silly and should have done something some other way, we want to get it right.
Is this the presentation you'll be giving at the other, or was this just created for this?
It was just for you, but
The only reason I ask is where you had the bars of green and red where it was allowed. It might have been cool to have it 2 lines. One was like what's now, what's proposed.
oh, okay,
So it's easy to see, oh, nothing changed, or, oh, you're changing this.
yeah, I can do that.
would be my only suggestion. You did a great job.
And then we also have like a really complicated matrix of like by use,
yeah.
how the density is affected, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's really too big for a slide. Thank you. Yes, we'll give a similar version. The goal is at Planning Commission, we're going to be high level the first time, give people time to digest, and then we'll come back and get into those line item code changes. It is a significant volume of stuff. In fact, I printed it, and I don't know why the printer printed single side, but still, it's like a lot of inches. And so, as much as you can give us help, we're here. This is for you, the community, and yeah.
That's going to be a kind of an interesting challenge. I think I know why you're doing this. Give more flexibility to housing and design and land use and all that, which is good. But here I've struggled for 1.5 years or 2 years to learn some of the new codes and the terminology and all that. Now you're going through clusters and it's a conversion from what we think we know today. Some of it's going to be pretty much similar, but with a little twist. Some of it'll be a big twist to get to where we want to go whenever this goes into effect. So we're going to be thinking in the wrong time frame sometimes with, oh yeah, I know what they're talking about there. But really in the new one, it's
Yeah, code
rewording
changes.
that terminology, learning the language, the new language, really.
And yeah, so the crux of the whole project is to provide additional choices and mitigating some of those choices with design. And so I did talk to you a lot about density and not the design requirements, but that is a key component of it. And we don't anticipate this actually having a really significant impact on what actually gets built. We hope that it is used, but I mean, we've allowed cottages since 2004. We have one in appeal. You know, we've allowed ADUs since 2004. We have a handful. So, I mean, we're not solving the housing problem with this. We are doing the best we can with the supply side, providing options for people so that if they choose to utilize them.
What about existing projects that are underway now? Are they going to be impacted by this, or is it going to facilitate their way to go forward without any kind of problems with the code changes? Is this going to help them, or is it going to hinder them?
That's a good question. I think it will help everybody because we're clarifying a lot of the stuff we didn't talk about is clarifying what the existing code says and saying it once instead of 5 times slightly different ways. But when development applies, when the day they submit their land use application, that's the code they're locked into. So, you know, someone could withdraw or wait to submit until the new code goes into effect. It would go into effect 30 days after the final reading by the city commission. So, you know, mid-November, if this timeline works. But yeah, we get that every time we change our code. Ideally, only one time have I seen a developer submit an application the day after we had a code change with the wrong code. But normally we give them we've been giving heads up on our pre-apps for a long time.
Any questions, comments, Linda?
I have a question. You were talking about homes, those over, I believe, 20 years that can be sometimes divided up into more than one unit, 1, 2, or 3, and this falls under commercial code. What about, does that affect the existing homes that are already out there? I don't know if they were done legally or not, but you just drive by and you see there's 5 or 6 mailboxes. So I'm thinking there's 5 or 6 units in this big old house. How does that go? How would that affect their sellability if that was already an existing?
Yeah, that's a good question. So some are legal and some are not. Of course, I'm going to give the answer, but like McLaughlin used to be zoned to allow more, and now it's not. So there are some legitimate cases where they had multiple dwellings at one time, or they were before zoning, which was in the mid-50s or something like that. And so they are legal, but mainly it gives an avenue for things that are illegal to become legal. So it gives an avenue for people to feel safer in their homes because they could get the inspections to make it legal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another question I had is, do you have what the average costs are for building a home? Well, not a development, but I'm just a homeowner. I've got a lot, 10,000 square foot lot. I want to build a residential house for myself on there. Do you know what the cost would be for the permits to get through there? And is that easy and accessible and the average person could read and interpret this? Or do they need to get a land use attorney to help them go through the process, which would add to the cost, of course?
We don't see we see attorneys sometimes on land use. So if the house is near a stream and a historic district and a slope and things like that, it can get complicated real fast. But when it's just a house on a lot, we almost never see attorneys. We'll see, like a lone home builder or people doing it themselves frequently. And I can send you some examples. So the cost varies by the square footage of the home because our permits are based off valuation, which is based off square footage. But
2,000 square foot house. Yeah.
I'll send you some stuff, but you could guess that your permits will be about 30 to 35,000 for permitting, including SDCs, which is like the biggest chunk of that.
Okay.
So most of that is system development charges, which is a one-time fee to pay for infrastructure. So it's not the use of the sewer system, but it's, we need a bigger sewer system because you're using it, that kind of thing. And the process is relatively quick if it's just building a house. You do have to figure out if you have to do street improvements and stuff like that.
What about like, I know there's some
ADUs.
areas you have to have an Indian inspection of some sort, like.
And yeah, for
Those kinds
artifacts.
of things. How would a person know that ahead of time? Or does that just come up when you do the,
I mean, for archaeological,
yeah?
we send notice to the State Historic Preservation Office and all 5 tribes every time we have a pre-app. And we've been seeing pre-apps on most single-family homes because they're in overlay districts, to be honest. Most of them, you know, you hear all the easy lots are gone. That's generally pretty true, not gone, but not being built on at the moment. So yeah, we send notice whenever there's ground disturbance to the tribes. And it's just a notification process. When you're digging and you find some artifact, then you're legally required, and contractors know that, to stop and investigate. But they don't have to come do a special thing. We notify them for you.
What are their costs, like, and like for an ADU? Like I've got a house, I'm just building an ADU on the, what would I be anticipating in the cost? Do you have just ballpark?
All right, so one thing I forgot to mention is we, this was a goal for the city commission. So we were smart and we got a grant from Metro to hire consultants to help us do this work and facilitate these meetings and get the economists and stuff. One of the products out of that is some how-to guides about how to build a house, how to do an ADU, and it gives good resources for people and examples and things like that. Another output from this is a financial tool. So you put in that you want to build a house of X square feet, and it tells you how much you should expect, including consulting costs. And also if you want to do a land division or something, and like, don't quote us on it, but you know, it's a
And
round.
ADUs then will be on there too.
ADUs are on there too. So ADUs are an interesting bundle because you can Google an ADU plan and go buy the lumber and build it yourself. But we have almost never seen that. In Portland, Seattle, the whole region has almost never seen that. So the average cost of an ADU, so in our ADU booklet, we have 3 examples of 3 real life ADUs and what they cost, and then including the sweat equity level. But real life ADUs, they're costing between $150,000 to $200,000 because homeowners are building them so they could live in them. And they're 100% custom. They are fancy with high-end stuff. And that's just what's getting built. And then they maybe rent out their house, you know, and go live in the backyard. That's what we're seeing in reality. So we hope in the future there's other options. We're also seeing that rate of rental for the ADUs. For the unit itself, most of them do not get rented out to people. They are extended families or someone with some relationship to the homeowner, and 60% of the time or so, I can't remember the number, but around that. So most of the time it is to accommodate changing family dynamics or something like that.
So there are going to be SDCs on ADUs?
There are SDCs on ADUs. They're half a house. They're like
Half.
$13,000 right now
Okay.
for SDC component.
Did that just go down?
No, it actually is going, well, actually as of today, it might be slightly higher. As of Friday, it was about $13,000, but
I thought it
the
was
transportation SDC just went up, so I'll have to check it, effective today.
Okay, I thought it was double, at least double that.
For a single family house, it is. So it's ADUs, same as multifamily, yeah.
When you're talking ADUs, are you basically in that 150 to 200 square foot, or what's the minimum on an ADU?
We got rid of our minimum. So think tiny home. If you want to go
Tiny
tiny,
home, yeah,
you
what
could go tiny. You meet the same standards, and we used to, in our current code, we regulate the minimum size of an ADU as 400. If you want to have a cottage cluster of tiny homes that meet the same standards everybody else is, you can do that. Same with an ADU. So in the new code, there will be no minimums. In the current code, there are existing minimums.
There's a minimum through the construction code, though, not the city code, right?
Yeah, but
I thought I
It's
remembered.
questionable of how that changes over time. They just came out with a thing that says, so Building Codes Division from the state came out with something that says tiny homes on wheels are cars. So building code doesn't regulate them, or they're the same as RVs. There's suspicion that they're moving to reduce that minimum for the tiny home part for the foundation kind. So we'll be prepared.
Yeah. Great. Any other questions for Laura? Great.
Thank you.
Well, seeing no public, I would imagine there are no public comments tonight. Staff liaison, Christina sent out an email and for all of the things that we had asked her to get back to us, so we don't need to have a report on that. As far as tonight's liaison things, I have down to send out the updated spreadsheet with the numbers, because that also needs to go to CIC, to neighborhood chairs, not just to CIC members, and then sending us this presentation that you just did. Okay. For general business, we sent out some questions and asked the neighbors to talk about them. Did anybody do that or have a report back on that? We talked about it at our steering committee and got nothing new. We are my secretary, you know how when you tell somebody something and you tell them about 20,000 times, but until they see it in person, it doesn't hit them? Well, it just really hit her this last time when we sent out postcards, how many we send, and what the return on that is. Here is another problem that we're having. There's a new creation of, we are to send our postcard information to Buell's, CC Kelsey, she okays it, Buell's prints it, takes it to the post office. We give them a date we want it. We're getting it a week to a week and a half before we want them.
Yeah, I know.
So Buell says, well, we can't control when the post office sends them out. Well, then maybe we need Buell's to hold on to them, because it doesn't do any good to get a postcard 2 weeks before the meeting. Because
I
people
can
aren't-
take care of the post office issue.
So
Right.
how?
Well,
It's not our Oregon City post office that they take them
that's where
to,
he drops
right?
them off.
I thought he had to take them somewhere else.
No. Where's his permit?
I don't know.
Because if it's dropped off, it's put out within 2 days. We can't hold things.
So that's what my concern is that we need to reevaluate
Oh,
that.
permit.
If
Yeah, I don't-
Kelsey needs them and
Doesn't say.
Buell's needs them,
Oh, it
is that
says
far in
Portland.
advance, then we need,
Okay, he takes them to Portland.
I think he said that.
I have a card.
Oh, okay, he told me that Portland Post Office can retain them for either 2 or 3 to 5 business days.
Yeah.
I'm just
It's
saying, I
cheaper
sent it
on
out
the
3 weeks to the
permit.
date, send what I want them, and I've got them within a week. So we need to change that process.
I got mine today,
When's your meeting?
next Tuesday.
Perfect.
Yeah. Ours, we got
I got that
last
figured
week, and
out.
our meeting is on the 12th.
But it is.
And I
better-
asked for them to be delivered on the 7th.
It is slightly better to have them, I don't know.
No, it's not.
10 days early
1 week.
than to have
No,
it
you want it
2
1
days
week.
late.
Yes.
And we've gone
2
through
days late
enough of
is the
those 2
big-
days late.
You're right, but 2 weeks early is the same as 2 days late.
I agree. There's that percentage. How
So,
long can you leave
anyway,
that card
we
lay on
need
your
to
counter?
tweak this again, I think.
I'll go talk to Dave and see why he has it in Portland.
Okay.
That would save a lot.
I think all bulk mail goes through Portland.
No, because I process bulk mail in my office in Gladstone.
And I process bulk mail, it always has to go downtown Portland.
Okay,
Depends where
well, let's
it's
find out.
located.
Maybe we can do some research, because maybe we just need Buell's to hold on to it a little, not print them right the day they get the,
That's your closest
know.
contact that you can probably get some clarification from and say, don't send it to the post office more than this many days ahead of when we want it.
And thank you for the switch of staff. I appreciate that. And hopefully Kelsey's doing good.
yeah, I feel like I don't have any
Good
problems yet.
Great.
Okay, so if no one answered these questions, let's table it till next
Next time.
time.
All right.
Okay, round table. Janice?
We had a steering committee meeting. It was really good. We decided who we were going to have come to our meeting. We're going to have code enforcement come and talk, Nancy, and maybe Carl Kaufman, the developer on Warren and Prospect. Again, why? Okay, I'm surprised it's on there. We started to talk about our picnic that we have the Saturday after neighborhood night out.
Great. Linda?
We had a small meeting, attendance, but maybe just summer. And just there weren't a lot of people there, but it was a good meeting. We had CERT was there, and we had a nice talk about some people in the neighborhood who started a business with electric boats on the Willamette River, and that was very, very interesting. And then we started talking about a neighborhood picnic.
The
Sounds
lighting's
funny.
going, woo.
Yeah. So and it was a good meeting.
Great. Steve?
So we're having an issue with meeting sites. We've been thrown out of the county facility 3 or 4 years ago, and they told us that we had to pay to use it. Now we're having an issue that the school that we're holding them in has issue availability if they're not open all the time. So this last meeting, we were back at the county, and we'll see if that goes well. And we may change our meeting sites back to the
Red building?
red, it's not red anymore,
Oh.
but the community building. So I was out of town. I have no idea. I didn't see a follow-up from the meeting nor the minutes. So.
Okay.
If you change it, will you let us know and we'll change it on our website and then
Yes.
also on the agenda?
This is located at the River Shore Park Grill.
Gaffney Lane, we had a steering committee meeting, went great. We have our July meeting will be next Thursday, the 12th. We have the school resource officer coming. We are trying to get a date to be able to sign up for a tour. We are not able to, I've got no responses back from Melanie on that. So I sent another email again today, hoping to get some dates so we can sign up for that. And we are trying to get somebody to come, so otherwise I guess I'll do the dog and pony show, but we're trying to get someone to come and advertise for the 175th anniversary activities that will still be coming up, especially the big August one, but I'm not getting any response to any of the committee members. So that's what we are hoping to do at our July meeting.
Ditto on what Linda said. And I'll pass it to Vern.
We had our steering meeting primarily, it was probably 2 weeks ago, preparing for the picnic, which is the 10th of July. And I'm the world's worst secretary, and I usually rely on Roy. He's not there. And before that, it was Joyce. And now I get on the spot and I think I gotta find something.
Secretary.
We do have John Lewis as our speaker
To be in our
at the picnic.
Oh, well, yeah, I
And
know, I get that.
I know there's been some talk on the county's, the OSU new build, the extension new building. They were planned to come and talk at the picnic, but it doesn't look like that's a very good venue for having some of that type of stuff. And it sounded like they were going to withdraw and move it to next month or something like that.
Keep us posted on that, would you?
Pardon?
Keep us posted on that one.
Yep.
Thanks. Laura, anything else?
And if you want to come to the picnic,
I've got nothing.
Commissioner, welcome.
Hi.
Got anything for us?
Well, the only thing I've been working on the last, spent 2.5 days last week interviewing architects and project managers for our new police facility. So we've selected a architect and a project manager. Hasn't become public yet, but we did that.
And then we visited several police court facilities. Ours is a little different in that we have police and court together. So, so we've been out on visitations and finding out what not to do. And you know, we're doing this a little differently. We actually hired an architect as an advisor to. Was he knock on the?
Yeah, I think you're too closer.
Okay.
You're too quiet, Brian.
We've actually hired an architect that all he does, he's an advisor just on police stations. That allows us to go out and interview architects, not so much because they've got a lot of experience in police stations, because they're a good architectural firm. Because we have our own advisor to do this. So it's kind of a cool project, and I sat on the library building committee, and we use what's called a CMPC way we do this, and we hire the architect and the contractor and the project manager all within about 3 weeks, and we just push forward the whole way through. Instead of getting our architectural plans done, then you hire a contractor to look at this, you know, and this goes back and forth. So we do it all up front, and that's the template we used on the library. It's very successful, and that's what we're doing with the police station here, so pretty cool. And we'll be up there next door to Laura, so.
That's great.
Yeah.
Lots of
Hope you all
people
have
keep
toured-
asking, so good to
hope You
know.
all have toured her building. She did a great job on that, so that's gonna be a nice little asset for that project up there, so.
She does a great job hanging pictures if you need.
She allowed us to use her facilities as we're doing these interviews with these architects, so.
Oh, nice.
Very nice.
All right, anything else for this evening's meeting? That we are adjourned.